Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Paratari Jasodan Dan Brajajana Ranjana Jasodan Dan Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Namah Shilpadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravacharine Nirvishesha Punyavadi Rastyajati Satarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, what do I do to get this up?
This one, this one,
This one here?
this one.
Okay. Gotcha. That's on the screen now. Okay. Okay. So we're here celebrating the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, preacher of Krishna consciousness around the world, and how he set such a wonderful example through good and bad times. There's an expression, Sridhar Swami said, there is no time, there's no inauspicious time or difficult time to prosecute Krishna consciousness. Sometimes astrologers have to be called in to find out the right time or to do some act. Or sometimes people are thinking, right now, I'm too busy. Now's not the right time. But we saw by Srila Prabhupada's example, every moment was the right time to engage in Krishna consciousness. So I'll just read here. By the way, this was all prepared. What you see on the screen was prepared by Devi Shakti Mataji. So I'm just filling in for her. So I hope you'll tolerate. In a letter signed by Giriraj. So I think many of you who have been following know Giriraj. Prabhu. Prabhupada refuted the charge that his movement was, quote, a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. I believe this was stated in a letter after a news article came out in Bombay, at that time, Mumbai. And so people were responding to the positive reception devotees were getting, and the reporters were giving proper analysis. They were giving a proper report of what Srila Prabhupada had done and what his disciples were attempting to do. But some people had to find fault somehow. So in a letter, someone suggested, this is a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. This is the typical accusation, not only by people maybe attacking International Society for Krishna Consciousness devotees, but this is actually the attack typically of the Mayavads. That bhakti is somehow or other merely a sentimental idea. But they were attaching the word fad. So in English, of course, fad means some temporary thing. It comes and goes like a fad of a certain type of clothing becomes very popular and then that goes away. So that this idea was, this attack was these were sporadic, this was a sporadic fad of sentimentalists. So Prabhupada comes back hard and strong. How can our movement be sporadic when this science was taught in the Gita 5,000 years ago and instructed to the sun god millions of years before that? How can it be called sporadic when our activity is Sanatan Dharma, the eternal occupation of the living entity? Would faddists give up all meat eating, intoxicants, illicit sex, and gambling for over 5 years now? Would faddists give up friends, family, and money and get up at 4 a.m. daily, ready to go to any country in the world and preach in any conditions immediately on their request of their spiritual master? So this is Srila Prabhupada's challenge. And of course, Srila Prabhupada, as always, is using Shastra as the basis for his argument. He was never interested in academic or intellectual debate. He goes straight to Shastra. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivavita. Go ahead. You know the verse? Oh, it's here. Manu Ikshvarakve Bravet. So this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. He's telling him, this is not even Krishna is telling his disciple, even though it's coming from Bhagavan himself, from his lips. This is Krishna Katha at the highest level. It's Krishna speaking. And still, Krishna refers to the past, the authority. He says, this is not a new science. I spoke this science thousands and millions of years ago. So the translation is, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivishvan. And Vivishvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ishvaku. So Srila Prabhupada is referring to authority, and even Krishna is referring to antiquity, the past. This is not a new science. That's the principle of the thing. So that's how I scroll. This arrow does not work. Just do it that way. Okay, fine.
Oh, let
Oh,
me see.
yeah, it's okay.
This one.
Yes, next one. Yeah, sure. Thanks. Technical difficulties. Okay. How Srila Prabhupada begins to recruit life members like Shabda Jivan Lal, created right front, pictured, I guess, and Ramchandra Charbara standing far left. So these were some of the early ones. And of course, they were going against the grain. Not all of society was going to immediately participate. So certain people stood out, and Prabhupada recognized them. I guess I'll use my glasses. Try this. Prabhupada saw all news coverage of Krishna consciousness movement as an aid to propagating Krishna consciousness. All, even if it's a bad article, good or bad. Even by criticizing the Krishna consciousness movement, he said the papers were broadcasting the holy name of Krishna. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami would often grade his disciples' essays on how often they would write Krishna in the essay, in the answers to questions. How often did you refer to Krishna? And I remember when I joined the movement, Srila Prabhupada would always say, we like all newspaper articles as long as they are mentioning the Hare Krishna mantra or they're mentioning Krishna's name. It's auspicious. Uh, and Krishna's name was absolute. Mr. Sheikh Sharia, or Sheikh Sharia, held a special program for many important dignitaries of Bombay. Although he had expected no more than 200 persons, that's a good 200, it's a lot. Many more came. They were Bombay's elite, the women dressed in expensive silk saris and wearing gold and jewels, and the men in silk Nehru collared suits or white starched dhotis and kurtas. It's not working. See, it's not working. Okay, wait, what did you do? Anyways, Prabhupada held kirtan with his disciples and then he spoke briefly and gravely. You are all very intelligent persons, he said. You are all very learned and educated. You are all very great persons. I beg you. I take the straw of the street between my teeth and I beg you, just chant Hare Krishna. Please chant Hare Krishna. After his talk, Prabhupada left and the devotees showed slides of the Hare Krishna movement's activities around the world. They also made their first public life membership appeal. And Mr. G.D. Somani, one of India's leading industrialists, as well as Mr. Seksaria, signed on as members. So this was a historic beginning of the process. And then there is a list of the benefits of life membership. Some life members, if they gave the big sum of 1,111 rupees, seems very small today, they would receive all books thus far published as well as all future publications, as well as lifetime subscription to Back to Godhead. He is also free to visit any of our temples, take prasadam there, and stay there if he likes. Okay, then there's the donor member, receives all. This was a new concept, 100% new. So they're just trying it now, getting the concept moving. Donor member receives all literature thus far published, as well as a lifetime subscription to Back to God at BTG. Price of 555 rupees. The next level, or lower level, is subscription member receives a lifetime subscription to Back to God magazine. Price is 222 rupees. And I don't know if it was listed as common member, but anyways, initial membership was he receives a 1-year subscription to Back to God magazine. Now, of course, Srila Prabhupada, that was only 33 rupees. Now, Srila Prabhupada himself started Back to Godhead magazine single-handedly in India, and then he brought the concept to America. He organized his disciples to publish Back to Godhead regularly, even in the beginning days. In the beginning, they didn't have a printing press. They had to make copies on a copy machine and staple it. That was the initial stage, you know. So you can see how it was a very crude beginning, and then it became a very big organization. Okay. Although Prabhupada was happy to see the number of ISKCON life members increasing with his shipment of books from Dai Nippon, they had not arrived, made him anxious. So here you have Srila Prabhupada, as we'll see in this chapter, and as always, but moving very quickly, engaged day and night in the process of broadcasting Krishna consciousness one way or another in India. And yet he still has 40 temples around the world. He has disciples around the world. He is translating and writing commentary on various Vedic literatures. And he's dealing with so many matters of publication. This is all going on simultaneously. If you were just to follow Prabhupada on a physical level of day-to-day life, moving here and there and moving here and there, you could hardly keep up with him. But still, in the wee hours of the night, he's writing letters to his disciples. Sometimes he has a dictaphone. Sometimes he's writing it by hand, with his own hand. He just never stopped. Because I was with Srila Prabhupada for 3 days in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the United States. And that direction. If you have some knowledge, you'll know Kurukshetra is out there. Passing. Kurukshetra, Dharmashetra. So, it becomes a special moment for devotees when they know they're getting near Kurukshetra. So Prabhupada began the 2-day train ride. Years ago, Prabhupada had traveled as a preacher in India alone, riding the trains, Jhansi, Delhi, Kanpur, Calcutta, and Bombay to publish back to Godhead. So he started that. And solicit support. After only 5 years in the West, he now had the great advantage of sincere devotees. And now the Indians were taking notice. So on this stage, which is very crowded in this picture, someone has taken the difficulty to identify some of the Srila Prabhupada's disciples. And the caption reads, 7 men and 2 women. I'm not sure if they're really on that stage. So Gurudas, Jamuna, Koshalya, Devananda, Revatinanda, Nandakumar, Gopal. You may know Gopal. He has just left recently. He did so much. And there he is, part of this early group. Bhakta Bruce, later Bhanu Swami, and Giriraj. Okay. Oh, see. So he had stationed Achyutananda Swami and Jayapataka Swami, Hansaduda, and others in Calcutta. I wonder how they got along. Those were pretty tough guys. Tamal Krishna, Sham Sundar, and others in Bombay. His disciples would make life members and try to establish permanent ISKCON centers in 2 of India's major cities. His Krishna consciousness movement was beginning in India, and he wanted to travel with his disciples wherever there was an opportunity to preach. Just as he had worked in America, never settling comfortably in one place, but always traveling, speaking about Krishna, meeting new people, and offering them devotional service, so he would also work in India. I mean, it is the typical thing, isn't it? If you're establishing an institution somewhere, isn't it the typical thing you find a place to develop? You think, okay, I will start in Delhi, I will start in Calcutta, I will start in Bombay, something like that. And then you concentrate and you try to find a suitable location, and then you try to build it up, and you try to build up a congregation of interested people who are coming. But Prabhupada wasn't like that. He was all over the place. Right from the beginning of the early days in the United States, of course, he came in 1965. He established the corporation and the first temple 1 year later in 1966. After preaching in various parts of New York City, he finally got something going. But he wasn't satisfied. Okay, now I have a temple in New York, big city, important place. Now I just develop. No. He was immediately asking his disciples, oh, you go to Montreal. Okay, you go to Los Angeles. Like that. Within weeks almost sometimes, or certainly within a year of their having Diksha, he was sending people. And he had faith in them because they were repeating his words. They weren't inventing anything. So in other words, the product, if you like, that they were delivering, the news, the Shakti, was with them because they were chanting, going to the morning program, following the rules and regulations. So they carried the Shakti from Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was writing them letters. So somehow or other, temples started developing in different parts of the United States within 1, 2, and 3 years And within a 4-year period, he had 40 temples. They were functioning, including London, Paris, Rome. He wasn't satisfied to sit in one place and just cultivate and cultivate. He didn't like that. So the train arrived in Kurukshetra station. Near here, said Prabhupada, Lord Krishna spoke Bhagavad-Gita 5,000 years ago. They say it does not exist. That is to say, the place of Kurukshetra. They, meaning people who like to rewrite history. They have no faith in Shastra. They have no faith in Mahabharata and Bhagavad-Gita. So they say there's no real place. They say it does not exist. A mythological place. It is a symbol of the field of the body and the senses, they say. Okay, so the Kshetra, some intellectuals, some fast talkers, they come up with newer and newer ideas. They become famous with their new ideas, and they publish Bhagavad-Gitas with all kinds of strange commentaries. And they say, oh, Kurukshetra represents a symbolic field of the body and the senses, or something like that. This is going on. Not a small thing. Unfortunately, the bookstores are packed with all these crazy Bhagavad Gitas. This is how Maya works. Maya works in all ways, including the pollution of the Bhagavad Gita. And that's why Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is. They say it is an allegorical place. So it's a story. They try to diminish God like this. But here we are at the station. As he spoke, the sun was setting, and a bright orange sky shone over the flat land. How can they say Kurukshetra is not a real place? He continued. Here it is before us, and it has been a historical place for a long, long time. When the train arrived in Amritsar station, members of the Vedanta Sammelan, which I guess basically means like a meeting, committee received Prabhupada and escorted him and his disciples to a park on the outskirts of the city. They showed him the large pandal erected by the Vedanta Sammelan and assigned him and his disciples their quarters, 2 small rooms. Prabhupada took one room, and the 2 women and 2 women the second room. And the 7 men slept outdoors on cots. Good luck on that. I think they slept on the ground. Cots, maybe. The first night in the northern climate was cold, available bedding was meager, and none of the devotees had brought warm clothing. So, these devotees who were traveling with Prabhupada, when they found out that they weren't going to have a room, none of them said, where's our room? What's going on? They just accept. That was the mood. In New York City in 1969, we had moved from 26 Second Avenue, only a few blocks up, to a slightly better place. It's nice in some ways. But in the summers, there was no air conditioning. Air conditioning was very typical in America, but we could not afford such a thing. It was simple ashram. So in the middle of the summer, the brahmacharis would climb the back staircase, which was really a fire escape, outdoor fire escape. And they'd climb to the roof and sleep on the roof. The brahmacharis would sleep in the roof. In New York City, but sleeping on the roof. And at that time, pollution was more a problem. Since then, so many laws have been passed, and the air is cleaner now. But so we would wake up in the morning, because I was part of that temple for a while, and we'd wake up in the morning covered with little pieces of soot because the air was carrying from factories or chimney somewhere. So, but we never complain, because once you become a servant of Srila Prabhupada, your only goal is to somehow or other, can I do some service? So these devotees, these American, they had never slept like this before, but okay, there's no room for us, we'll sleep outside. Just like when the Krishna Balaram temple was built, there was no brahmachari ashram. And the inner rooms of the guest house, they were not fit because there was no air there and there was no electricity back in the beginning. You might have a fan, but it never worked. So the brahmacharis would all sleep on top of the temple. You see. So they're coming from Europe, they're coming from America, and I said, that's where you can sleep, up on the roof. Oh, okay. At 4 the next morning, the devotees congregated in Srila Prabhupada's room for Mangal Arti and Kirtan before the deities of Radha and Krishna. Where is my helper? Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Okay, yeah. At 4 the next morning, okay, so now they're engaged in Mangal Arti and Kirtan at 4 in the morning before the deities of Radha and Krishna, the same deities who had been traveling with Prabhupada for the past 1.5 years. Despite the austere conditions, the devotees felt fortunate to have such intimate contact with Prabhupada and Radha Krishna. Prabhupada played mridanga, leading the chanting of prayers to the spiritual master. Afterward, he had the pujari distribute to each devotee a bit of fruit and sweetmeats that had just been offered to the deities. It was still before sunrise, and the room was chilly. As the devotees sat huddled beneath a naked bulb, Prabhupada had them read aloud from Srimad Bhagavatam. That same morning, Prabhupada attended the Vedanta Sammelan. There were thousands of people in the audience, and since most of them did not understand English, Prabhupada spoke in Hindi. His presentation pleased everyone, and the committee members honored him by making him president of the Vedanta Sammelan. Maybe it was a new organization. Anyways, they were enthusiastic. That's nice. I'm just seeing if I can recognize. I see Devananda in the lower right-hand corner, I think. Although the program was scheduled only for several hours in the morning and evening, Prabhupada did not limit his preaching to these times. He preached every hour of the day. While he sat in his room, a constant stream of guests came to him, hundreds of pious Hindus seeking his blessings. Recognizing this vestige of Vedic culture, in other words, so many things in modern India, or so many aspects of Vedic culture may have been forgotten or neglected, no longer followed, but this was being followed. That people were very interested to go to a legitimate sadhu and take his blessings. And so that's very auspicious. So recognizing this vestige of Vedic culture, he pointed it out to his disciples. Just see, he said, how they treat a saintly person. Yes. I can tell you, though, that the Americans, not only his disciples, but even many members of American high society gained a lot of respect for Srila Prabhupada. When he came to the United States, I believe in around 1975, the head of the airport, there's 3 big airports in New York City, and one of them, the head of the entire operation, came out to greet Srila Prabhupada with a limousine and escorted him from the plane. and through customs and everything. So there, many people came to respect Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada also began receiving the usual flood of invitations to visit the homes of Hindu families. He accepted as many invitations as possible, more than possible. Yeah. So Prabhupada was eager. He was greedy to preach. It seemed to his disciples, it seemed like this is overload. It's too many. Prabhupada moved quickly. When the cars were ready, he would come out of his room and go, leaving behind anyone who wasn't ready. After each engagement, he would get into his car and go directly to the next. Latecomers would sometimes find he had already left. They would then jump into a bicycle rickshaw and try to catch him. A wrong direction or a missed turn might make them miss the next engagement. And when at last they would catch up, so he might do, like 6, 8 engagements in one day. And his disciples, they probably couldn't even get directions. They didn't speak Hindi. Many of the people on the street, they didn't speak English. So they were getting lost trying to keep up with Srila Prabhupada. A wrong direction or a missed turn might make them miss the next engagement. And when at last they would catch up, they would find Prabhupada coolly, gravely, and in the midst of a lecture on Bhagavad-Gita, or laughing and taking prasadam with the host. Every day brought at least half a dozen engagements. Come to our temple for darshan, come to our house for prasadam. And whenever Prabhupada would return to his ashram, he would find a long line of guests waiting to spend a few moments with him. None of the devotees could match Prabhupada's pace and enthusiasm. His energy seemed never to wane. For his disciples being invited incessantly, or is it insistently? I can't read it. They were trying to take a full meal. Okay, what's happening is they're trying to eat too much because they're going to so many engagements. And so they would go to half a dozen houses in a day. They would tend to overeat, and some of them got sick, but Prabhupada knew how to handle the situation expertly. He would fully satisfy each host, speak about Krishna consciousness, hold kirtan, take a little prasadam, and move on. One day, in response to an invitation, Prabhupada visited the home of Baladev Indra Singh, a descendant of one of ancient Punjab ruling families. So this is a Kshatriya. Although nearly 60, Mr. Singh was still a robust Punjabi Kshatriya, handsome, tall, and sporting a big black mustache. He showed Prabhupada and his disciples through his elegant home, and with its large portraits of ancestors, uniformed Kshatriyas with their helmets and swords. In the trophy room, which had many animal skins and stuffed heads mounted on the wall, Mr. Singh brought Prabhupada and his disciples before his prize trophy, a large tiger's head. Prabhupada approached closely. "You have killed this?" he asked. "Yes," Mr. Singh replied, and he described the details of the hunt. The man-eater had killed many people in a nearby village. Mr. Singh explained. "So I went and shot it." Prabhupada's eyes widened, and he turned to his disciples. "Oh, very nice." Later, Prabhupada sat in a chair, and Mr. Singh sat before him on the floor. So just see the etiquette. The Kshatriya is sitting on the floor. And Mr. Singh sat before him on the floor. Okay. He said something was troubling him. An astrologer had told him that in a previous lifetime, thousands of years before, he had fought in the battle of Kurukshetra, but on the side against Krishna. Now notice how Prabhupada is not diplomatic. The man is claiming some kind of special heritage. Oh, I actually fought in the battle of Kurukshetra. Astrologer told me. Prabhupada doesn't. Naturally, you want to flatter somebody, make them feel good, but Prabhupada doesn't buy it. He says, that's not possible. Prabhupada said, everyone present at the Battle of Kurukshetra was liberated. Everybody, both sides. If you had actually been the Battle of Kurukshetra, you would not still be within this material world. But Prabhupada doesn't change the philosophy to suit people. Generally, if somebody has some funny idea, but Prabhupada straightens them out. Mr. Singh wasn't certain whether to feel relieved or disappointed. But Prabhupada assured him, that's all right, don't worry. Now you're a devotee of Krishna. This picture, does anybody know where this is? Do we have a temple in Amritsar? Is this? I don't know. This, I don't recognize. Um, excuse me? Okay. When Prabhupada asked Mr. Singh to become a life member of ISKCON, he agreed immediately. He confessed that when he had first invited Prabhupada and his disciples, he had actually been skeptical. Yeah, naturally. So many sadhus. Come on, another one. It's natural, intelligent to be skeptical. But after being with Srila Prabhupada for a few minutes, he said, all his doubts and suspicions had vanished. He would be happy to become ISKCON's first life member in Amritsar. I remember meeting an Indian gentleman in America, a doctor, who later went back to Mumbai and became very active and did a lot of service and helped them establish the Bhaktivedanta Hospital. Wait, that's in Pune, or is it in? But it's in Bombay. Yeah, yeah. So he was instrumental in that. But I remember I was eating lunch with him in a Govinda's restaurant in the United States, and he said, when I first met Srila Prabhupada, I was trying to find something wrong with him. It's a typical thing for a businessman or an educated man. I was trying to find some fault in him. He came from that position because he was suspicious, but I couldn't find any faults. So he was happy to become ISKCON's first life member in Amritsar. Okay. Although the devotees requested Prabhupada to take fewer engagements, he would not slow down. It was his disciples, he said, who were finding the pace difficult. One night, after the 8th and final engagement of the day, Prabhupada returned to his room just a little before midnight. For the devotees, the day had been exhausting. So it's already midnight. Prabhupada's still at it. And they were eager to get to bed as soon as possible. Noticing Prabhupada's light, I can tell you that actually Srila Prabhupada made some exceptions for us in America, because on the Friday and Saturday nights in New York, for instance, so many people would be going out into the streets to go to the theaters to see these. It's famous Broadway, so many theaters where people are putting on plays, and we would go out and chant, and we wouldn't get back till 2 a.m. It was terrific, fantastic preaching, going out and chanting till 2 a.m. in New York City. And Prabhupada said, you don't have to go to Mangalarti on those days. That was on Friday and Saturday nights. He let us avoid that. For the devotees, the day had been exhausting, and they were eager to get to bed as soon as possible. Noticing Prabhupada's light still on, one of them went to his window. Prabhupada was sitting at his desk, leaning back against the wall, listening to a tape recording of one of his talks he had given that day. So you may wonder, why would he be listening? So I happened to, again, for a brief 3 days, but it was fantastic. I acted as Srila Prabhupada's personal servant, and when he would go to the temple in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the state of so many states in the United States, 50 states, one of them is New Mexico, and so there's one city, Santa Fe. So he gave a lecture to students there. And fortunately or unfortunately, the crowd that came to see Srila Prabhupada that night was all young couples. They weren't even married. They were just couples coming out to see the Swami. And they were very polite and they listened very nicely, but it was kind of awkward. All these boys and girls together. So Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture all about how Radharani is the most, Srimati Radharani is the most beautiful girl and Krishna is the most beautiful boy. It was not a typical lecture for situation. He didn't think, okay, in front of this group, I'm now going to tell them about the horrors of the material world in great detail, the three modes of material nature, life after life, you're going to suffer. He thought, I don't think this group will like to hear that at all. They might just walk out. So he gave another type of lecture, which is not typical of Prabhupada. Usually Prabhupada would always emphasize that the material world is a place of suffering. But he's looked at this crowd, they said, they're not going to agree. So I'll give them very introductory. And he pointed to a painting in the temple, very nicely done by Jadharani Prabhu, of Radha and Krishna. And he started describing it. So when it was over, we went back to where he was staying, and I made some hot milk for him. And then he called me over to the table. He was sitting in this kitchen, and he said, so, what did you think of the lecture? He's asking for feedback. The spiritual master is wanting to talk. He really did it for me because he wants me to think. He wants me to interact. He wants me to participate. But Prabhupada was open to thinking of newer and better ways without changing the message, never changing the message, but how to preach according to time and place. So here Srila Prabhupada is listening to a tape and he's thinking, He's analyzing his own preaching. One afternoon, Prabhupada and his disciples went to see the famous Golden Temple of the Sikhs. A guide took them around and answered Prabhupada's questions. Sikh businessmen, the guide explained, maintained the temple and its expenses. The Sikhs pride themselves in the assertion that no one in Amritsar should go hungry, and they daily feed dal, chapatis, and 10,000 people. This interested Prabhupada, and he observed their massive operation. This is how to distribute prasadam, Prabhupada said. We should do like this. Prabhupada signed the guest book, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Under religion, he wrote, this is kind of funny, Krishnite. And under comments, he wrote, very spiritual. I guess the devotees were anxious to see what Prabhupada wrote in the book, so they recorded it, this information. Prabhupada and his disciples visited Ram Tirtha Swarov, the lake where in a bygone age the great sage Valmiki had his ashram. The terrain surrounding Ram Tirtha Sarovar was dry, rocky, and vegetation was sparse. As they stopped at the beautiful bathing ghat, its steps leading down to the lake, the devotees were in a jubilant mood, happy to be on a field trip with their transcendental father and teacher. The peaceful lake and the beautiful ghat seemed ideal setting for being with Prabhupada. The devotees knew little of Ram, Lord Ram, listened intently as Prabhupada began to tell some of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and in his incarnation of Ramchandra. During the last days of his early pastimes, Prabhupada said, Ram banished Sita, his wife, an eternal consort. Pregnant and alone, Sita sought shelter in the ashram of Valmiki, where she soon gave birth to a son, Love. Valmiki created. No, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Kush is coming. Be patient. Valmiki created another son for Sita from straw and named him Kush. Thereafter, Valmiki taught Love and Kush the entire Ramayana. The twins committed the whole text to memory and then chanted Lord Ram wonderful pastimes before great sages and Brahmins. Later, Love and Kush began traveling widely and reciting the Ramayana. They eventually, this is not on, I guess. They eventually came to Ayodhya, where Lord Chandra saw them. Upon hearing about the wide acclaim of the recitation, Ram invited them to his palace to recite the Ramayana. Although they were his sons, he still did not recognize them. Meanwhile, one day, as Sita was out walking, the ground opened before her. I guess this would depend on which Ramayana you're reading, the Valmiki or what's the other? Huh? Tulsidas, yeah, because I think this is rendered slightly differently. Came out walking. The ground opened before her, and she returned into the earth from which she had appeared. These events Prabhupada explained as he stood with his followers by Ramtirtha Sarovar. Had happened no less than 800,000 years ago. For the devotees, it was as if Prabhupada had opened a new door to the spiritual world. Did you want something? Oh, it's off. It's back? No. Okay. The organizers of the Vedanta Sammelan repeatedly asked Prabhupada and his party to play a larger part in the Pandal program. All right, I'm going to need you now. Well, it's just for me to read this, even though you can't see it. The scheduled discourses, I can't read this. Now it's moving. The scheduled discourses were mostly on Mayavad philosophy. God is impersonal. All religious paths are equal and lead to the supreme. One. All is one. We are all God. So this is very typical. This is an international disease. It is not unique to India. Is there anything else you want to try? So this is the Mayavad disease. And when Srila Prabhupada came to New York, in his beginning lectures at 26 Second Avenue, he had these fairly well-educated disciples. They had been to college. Some of them gotten a PhD. One was a professor of English at a university. So he had these were educated people. And he's on and on talking about the Mayavadis and how they had taken the Bhagavad-Gita and twisted it into something wrong. And one disciple, Harigriva, who was a professor, he kept on thinking, who are these Mayavadis? They must be some little group in India somewhere. Maybe a tiny group. I've never heard of them. And they're somewhere in India, and Prabhupada has a problem with them. He doesn't like them. This was his interpretation of the impersonalists, because Mayavadis. And so they were, and then later on he said he figured out he was talking about us. We are the Mayavadis. And sure enough, one of his very good friends who almost got a PhD, he was a PhD candidate in American history. He was hearing Prabhupada night after night. Prabhupada hated the Mayavadis. He would fight them tooth and nail, impersonalists, degrading Krishna's position. And so one of his disciples was listening how Prabhupada was criticizing Dr. Radhakrishna's Bhagavad-Gita, because in this Bhagavad-Gita it says, is not unto Krishna you must surrender, but is to the unborn, unmanifest. This is his nonsense interpretation. So one night, one disciple said, well, I don't know. And he starts taking Dr. Radhakrishna's point of view, and he starts explaining it. And as I say, this devotee was a PhD candidate, so he's very educated. He's very able to express himself in academic, scholarly terms, and he's taking Dr. Radhakrishna's point of view and saying maybe he's not all wrong. And then finally Prabhupada says, are you through? And this devotee says, no, I have a little bit more to say. And he continued talking. And finally, Prabhupada again says, are you through now? And he said, yeah, okay, I've said enough. At which point, they had a little Vyasasan for Prabhupada. It wasn't very big, but it was like a choky little, and Prabhupada stood on it on behalf of Krishna, on behalf of his spiritual master. He stood up on the Vyasasan, looking down, and he started screaming at his own disciple. And his voice became like Lord Nrsingadev, because as Vaishnavas, we do not tolerate the Mayavad philosophy. It's a direct attack on Krishna. So here, the scheduled discourses were mostly on Mayavad philosophy. God is impersonal. All religious paths are equal and lead to the Supreme One. All is one. We are all God. By the way, so this is their philosophy. We're all God. The story I just told you was told to me in front of the devotee who made the mistake several years later. And he was giving great detail because he was there also. And so this devotee was kind of ashamed. But the point is, I was getting firsthand description. I didn't make up that story. Such dry speculations. Prabhupada, against books are the basis. Huh? Books are the basis. The Shastra is the basis. No speculation. Dry speculations could not hold the public's attention, and the Sammelan organizers daily requested the devotees to hold kirtan in the pandal. With so much other preaching, Prabhupada preferred holding programs of his own in private homes and around the city. So we'll have to end here, but this is very reminiscent of various sages or members of our parampara who were great devotees of Krishna, and sometimes Mayavadis would want to debate them. Just like on this stage, there would be other sects and they would be arguing the Mayavad. Prabhupada chose not to bother with that public display of argumentation. So in our parampara, it's very typical. Was it Rupa Goswami? Sometimes somebody would want to debate with one of our, maybe Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur. It was Rupa Goswami, yes. And he'd say, "Oh, I will sign a paper. You win. You win the debate." Go. Now you can go. You can go call this paper you won the debate. Useless. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada was not interested in having public displays of wasting his time debating with people who have no faith, no bhakti, no sadhana, no engagement in chanting the holy name. And so they're aparadi, mayavada, or mayavadi aparadi. So he didn't want to bother. And therefore we see how Srila Prabhupada did not take their invitation. So we should also realize that we are not interested in wasting our time in this kind of endeavor. Srila Prabhupada didn't. Well, okay, it's 7 o'clock. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.